Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everyone. Not easy being a parent. If you are one, I don't have to tell you that. But even more of a challenge if you have a child or children with severe emotional or behavioral issues and or challenges. How do you navigate through that? Well, you call upon the help of somebody like this woman here who can offer lots of insight. Today, specifically, we're going to be talking about disciplining our children. I wrestle with this one all the time. She joins us from a great organization called Healthy Foundations, and she's Dr. Michelle Adler, and she's back with us. Dr. Michelle Alden, and she's back with us. How are you today?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here.
I saw your name, and I have a friend, and his last name is Adler. So I looked at your name, and I looked at it that way. Nope, Alden. So when it comes to discipline, I don't even know where to begin because there's times over the years, and I have teenage kids, where I wonder what is the right thing to do in terms of making sure it sends a message that something is not the way it should be. Behavior needs to change, and all of that. Where do we begin with that?
I know it's such a big topic, really. And I think one of the worst feelings as a parent is when you don't know what to do, when you feel like just, you've exhausted everything that you know and behaviors continue. And just that hopeless feeling of like, I know I don't want to do this, but I don't know what to do. And I
Right.
think that that's also a really hard place for kids too, when they get this sense that all the adults around them don't know what to do with them anymore. I think that that's it may seem like it's powerful in some ways because the kid may feel in control, but it's really disempowering to feel like nobody can handle me or nobody knows what to do with me. So.
Mm. And it's, right away, many of us think, the device, I'm taking that device. That's what I'm going to do. And my daughter has said before, and she's great. This is a while back, but she's like, what is that going to do? And I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, she's right. And
It
the
makes me feel better.
exactly. But then I looked at it from a different angle that is her connection to the world. So I'm taking that away. We're humans, we're social creatures. Now she doesn't have a connection to friends and so that's not good. If you have a situation, behavioral issue, whatever it is, now you're making it worse by taking the phone away. I don't know. I don't know if you agree with that thinking, but that's where my mind was at that time.
Yeah, so I look at it in terms of cause and effect, and that is an actual executive functioning skill that we all need to develop, and some kids are delayed in developing that skill. So they're not able to tie in like I did this and this is what happens. And so you see it a lot in their impulsive behavior that they're not looking at like if this happens, then what will happen? They're not processing that way. And we want to help develop that skill because it's huge in helping them to develop that impulse control and better behaviors. So when I look at discipline, I look at it not as punishment and reward.
Hmm.
And I also see that a lot of parents are very hesitant to even talk about discipline. Like there's a lot of parents that are not sure that they can even discipline their kids. But if you look at it like punishment, then that's not the way that I go with it. We started calling punishment consequences. This is the consequences of your behavior. And I'm okay with that as long as we can tie it in to the behavior in a way that really helps them to see this action caused this result and not just this action made my mom mad or my dad mad. And then this is what happened. And when you're mad, you take my phone or whatever it is. It's like,
Right.
no. Like, so it has to, and especially with neurodivergent kids, like it has to be really concrete and it has to really fit what just happened. And I look at it more as a teaching we're teaching and training. We're not just punishing a bad behavior, or what we might see as a bad behavior.
Interesting. And you just said something I believe as a parent is key, that you need to do whatever you're going to do in the moment. A lot of us are like, let me think what's the best, time goes by, but they don't make the same connection if you let that time go by. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, and sometimes I think it's an afterthought. Like, I work with a lot of parents where we are dealing with things in the moment, but then as the parents think back about it, like the kid had a meltdown, some kind of tantrum, or they, maybe even yelled something or broke something, and then we deal with it in the moment, and then later the parent is like, well, but shouldn't they have some, like, are they just getting away with it? I hear that a lot. Like, we don't, when I don't want them to just get away with it. It's like, okay, what are they getting away with? What do you think they're getting away with? And how do we deal with that piece of it? Because coming in later after we've already dealt with it and moved through it, then to go back and say, oh, and because you had that tantrum, or because you threw that fit, now you can't go to your friend's house, or you can't go watch the movie with us, or whatever it is.
How do it popped in my head, and I'm going to say it. How do you determine the punishment fits the crime, so to speak? Like, you're not overdoing it, but you're not underdoing the consequence.
That's such a great question, because I think a lot of times parents hear, like therapeutic parenting, or like soft parenting skills is what I've heard it called. And they feel like, we're not going to react, we're not going to do anything. But I think there's a balance. Like, we're not going to overreact and we're not going to underreact, but there definitely needs to be an action. So I think that a lot of times we're talking about, in that moment, like, how do we move through that, and what are we teaching in that moment? And when a kid is really highly dysregulated, they're not learning a lot. Like, they're not going to learn because you were talking to them or lecturing them, or and that's can be really frustrating for parents, because you can feel like you just said it so well, and you explained it exactly. I've told you this a million times, not to do this, and and so the consequences kind of come out of our frustration that they did this thing that they've done before. And really what we have to look at is, what helps them to move through this, but also what is going to help them learn that this behavior is not the right way that we want to go. So I look at it in terms of making the right thing easier, and the thing that we don't want more difficult.
Say that last part again. I want to process that one.
Okay, making the right thing easier, smoother, like, this is good, we're on a good path, and the wrong thing more difficult, and maybe more uncomfortable.
What about children? And for whatever the reason is, maybe they have challenges. If they're just defiant, you feel like you're not getting through at that point. Is it the consequences get escalated? How do you deal with that?
I work with a lot of kids that have an actual defiant disorder.
Oh, wow. I honestly
that
didn't know that was a disorder.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
They it typically follows like an ADHD diagnosis, and then a few years later they'll start to get these different conduct disorders, and one of them is defiance. And I think that, to me, it shows that there's a lot of resistance, and it has to do with the relationship that's happening with this child, and maybe not just even the parents, but other adults, right? It's the relationship they have with authority, with maybe even instruction, and being directed. And so as I start to work with parents, we work a lot on how we approach things to not increase that level of defiance. So parents are taught to make the direction that they want the child to go very clear. Instead of stop doing this, it's, come do this. And also being able to back that up. So we're not just throwing demands out there that the kids are like, no, and then run off and don't do it. The other thing I really like with defiant kids is I kind of use that in call it kind of using it in my favor. I'll tell a defiant kid, like, I know you're not going to want to do this, but here's what we're going to do. And if they're truly have that, I call it impulsive negativity, their first response is like, oh, I'm going to do it because you told me that I don't want to do it, or you told me that I'm not going to be able to do it, and so you can you can't use the reverse psychology of it all the time, but it's nice to kind of cushion that with the child. I think that it's a mistake to think because my child's, there's also another thing that is called as demand avoidance, or defiant. They don't want to be told what to do, to then stop giving them instructions or stop telling them things, or but I think that most of the kids I see, like they really value the highly structured, like pre-teaching, setting the parameters. This is what we're going to do. If this happens, then we're going to do this. If cause and effect piece of it, if we can get through this without a problem, then we're going to move on to the next thing, or we're going to, be able to go do such and such. But really having somebody in charge really helps too, because a lot of kids that are defiant and have these things going on inside of their brain, it's kind of like a lot of static, I think, in their brains. And so when you can be really clear and directional, and it doesn't have to be mean or authoritative or militant, it's just very, very clear. You can say, please come sit down, just as nicely as you can say, did you want to come sit down right now? So we kind of set our kids up, I think, to be defiant when we ask a lot of questions about if they want to do it or not. And then we're like shocked when they're just like, no.
This is why parents need you, because it's almost like, before I deal with that situation, let me reach out to Michelle and find out how to properly word this to make the most impact, or get the best outcome. Yeah, it's like some parents just want to be nice. Hey, do you want to come over here and sit down? No. It's almost as if you asked for it. You asked for the answer.
Right. Exactly. Because then they say no. And then the next thing the parent says is, I want you to come sit down. Come sit down here. And they're
no,
like,
I don't want to. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And now they're fighting, but we gave them that opportunity from the start. And it's like, so I always tell parents, if you're going to give them a choice, or give them an opportunity to say no, then you have to be okay with the no, and we'll have to come around it a different way.
A question, not so much regarding discipline, but it's in the same wheelhouse. When your kid wants to do something, wants something, whatever it may be, should you always give an excuse, give a reason? Should you always give a reason, as opposed to, no, it's just I'm not comfortable with that, and then you leave it? Or should you say, like, for example, let's say your kid wants a friend to come over. Let's say you have a young teenager, and I want my friend Tammy to come over after school today, and you say, no, I'm not comfortable with that, because I'm not going to be home, and I don't want you guys in the house without me. Should you always have a reason for the answer, or just let it go?
Well, I wish it was as easy as yes or no, but I think that it kind of depends on where your child is at in the process.
Okay.
I think that with some kids, you can reach that place where, like, when they're asking, that's a legitimate request. They're asking in the right frame of mind. And so I think you can give that explanation, here's, I'm going to say no, and here's why. With parents, especially with teens, I always encourage parents to let your kids know, like, I want to say yes. Like, if our mindset is, I want to say yes, but I need more information, or or I can't say yes right now because of this. I think that's a good approach without it just being, a cutoff. If your child is asking for the third or fourth time, well, why? Why can't Tammy come over? You said that she could come over this weekend. Now you're saying no, and all of this kind of stuff. Then I feel like less explanation, less moralizing, less, of it being about you and more about like, my answer is no. We can put that on I call it the parking lot, what we can write that down here. And I will think about that and we'll pick a day and a time when that will work. So I feel like giving kids a concrete answer really helps. If you're like, not today, not now, that it's a little bit vague for our kids that get kind of stuck in that, they're hanging on to that. And that can happen even with your neurotypical kids where it's like they're hanging on to something that you said, maybe even 6 months ago. They can't remember that you told them to clean their room, but they can remember what you said about, such and such happening. So.
Oh, well, then it goes back to a fundamental, I believe, in that if you said, well, you can't have her over today, but maybe the weekend. Well, when we get there, we'll look at that. Or you say, yeah, the weekend be fine. You can't go back on what your word. That's, for me, a lesson learned there. If you say yes, you got to, unless something comes up, that's different. But following through in what you say, I think is important as a parent.
I think so too. And I think it builds trust, right?
Yes.
We want our kids to have that structure of trusting that we're going to keep our word because we're teaching them to do that as well. So I feel like I think there's a lot of things that are kind of common courtesy, and I think sometimes with parents and kids, like we forget that it may seem like a small thing to them to, there's things they're stressing about or the friends they want to see. It's like, I don't have time for that right now, but it's a big part of their world. And so letting them know, that if it's not going to happen now, like we use a schedule when I'm working with parents. So they have a schedule. So if something comes up that's not on the schedule that the kids want to do, then we can look at it and say, we can either put it here, or parents can say, we don't have time to do that today. But I'm going to put that on the schedule for tomorrow. But writing it down, being concrete, really builds a lot of trust. And then, the kids aren't as defiant with that because they know it's going to happen. Even kids with autism that really get stuck in wanting something and asking over and over and over, it gives a way to let go of it because we've already, and even if a parent does have to repeat themselves, they're like, I told you we're going to do that at 2:00. And then we've even used, if you keep talking about it and keep asking, I'm going to change the time and we won't have it today.
Is it okay to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I am really careful about having the kids on the family schedule dictate too much of that because I work with kids that will sabotage a family event by having a behavior or something like that. So I tell them, like we're not making it contingent on good behavior. If it's on the schedule that we're going to watch a family movie, even if we have a rough time at dinner, we're going to still watch a family movie, but one child may have to sit closer to the parents during that time, or they may choose that they don't want to watch it. It's like, okay, then you're going to be over here, so.
Right. So what I'm gathering here, Michelle, is it's follow through. And if you have to make tweaks and adjustments for whatever the reason is, child's behavior, the plans changed slightly. Let's say we were planning on going to the park, but now it's raining. So we're still going to have fun and do something. But there's a section of the park that's under an awning or whatever it might be. We had to tweak it for a reason, but we still, as a parent, follow through with what we said or we promised. That's kind of what I'm getting from you.
Well, and I think it's really important to realize, especially with neurodivergent kids, that those little places where we have to change things or we're not solid, they will use it they will use that to their advantage to push and push, right? When we're not solid. But on the flip side of that, they're not very flexible. And so we're teaching flexibility, like stuff happens and changes happen, but we have to
Mm,
keep in mind that neurodivergent kids really have a hard time with that. So I saw this when I was working in the schools with kids with autism, that they would have a meltdown about a different person coming to take them out to recess, but we don't necessarily know why they're having a meltdown. That change to us is no big deal, just somebody else taking you out to recess, who cares, right? But for these kids that get really stuck and you said it's going to be this way, and they're kind of, it feels like they're manipulating you or holding you to the letter of the law. It really has to do with their inflexibility in their brain. So coming around that very carefully, letting them know, like, there's going to be a change in the schedule. Like, I know we said we're going to the park, but it's raining. So what can we do? Do we want to, is it warm enough that we can still go to the park in the rain? Or are we going to go to an
mm.
indoor park? Letting them know that we didn't just change the plans on them for no reason.
I my first thought here is you have to also respect the child. If they're not comfortable with somebody else picking them up, it depends on their psychological situation. It could be one thing that, they're just being defiant and that's it. But I would have to cut some slack there. I don't know. Would you say that that's reasonable?
Yeah, I have a really hard time just calling a behavior just defiant for defiant reason, because
Yeah.
I really think that behavior is communication and there's something going on. And and while I don't spend a lot of time necessarily trying to help the parents see what's going on, but because I think most parents just want to know what to do about it, I think, it's kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt. Like, something is going on here. They're not just defiant out of the blue. When I see those kind of disorders come through, I'm like, oh, okay. And what else? What else is going on? Something's driving that
Yes.
behavior.
Yep. And personal experience, when you have to listen, and if there's a reason that they don't want to be picked up by, with a change in an individual, they're not comfortable. It is what it is, but I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, that you have to honor that to a point. I mean, if it just doesn't, yeah, in the situation make sense, or you feel that they're just saying it and there's not a true reason, that's a different situation. Either way, all of this is challenging. I mean, even when it comes down to the discipline, it's it's challenging territory for a parent.
It is. And I think it takes more time than we maybe thought getting into it, right? Like, it's this, I have parents that have told me, like, I feel like all I do is teach and reteach and teach. I'm saying the same thing over and over. And I
Mm,
help parents by looking at that pattern of what's happening, if there's a way to disrupt the pattern of what's happening. But at the same time, there is a lot of, like, if we have a behavior that keeps happening, have we done enough pre-teaching on how we're going to address that?
sure.
Maybe there's the same thing that happens every day at school. So it's like taking the time to, like, okay, so how are we going to handle that when that happens today? It's one of the things I love about working with kids is, like, yes, they do sometimes throw things at you that you don't know, but a lot of the stuff that parents really struggle with is very circular. It happens over and over. And even if you mess it up as a parent, you're going to get another chance. It's like, oh, I'm totally messed up. I yelled at my kid, or I, got mad and punished them. It's like, yeah, they'll give you another chance.
Mm, yeah, and it's also what you just said. I'm thinking, I'm always saying the same thing. I'm always saying, yeah, I'm sure you have those parents that say, all I do is yell at my kid. All I do is yell at them. And a lot of that comes from frustration too. Yeah, this is murky water to be in as a parent. So we call you. Michelle, what's the best way to find you, reach you, and start that process if you're a parent, you're dealing with stuff and need some advice, coaching, therapy? How do we do that?
Yeah, if parents are ready to dive in and they want coaching, they should contact me through my website, parentingchallengingkids.com. There's a Get Started page. They can set up a free call with me. If they want to know more about what I'm saying and teaching before they're quite ready to dive in with a call, they can go to the YouTube channel, Parenting Challenging Kids, and watch videos and kind of hear more. A lot of parents will contact from there. You could also ask questions in the comments. And then I have a book called Parenting Emotionally Distressed Kids, and that can give you a really great overview. And I have a lot of parents that use that book, and then they're like, okay, this is working, but this isn't working, or this, I'm not sure how to do this. So
awesome. Great having you here. Learned a lot. I feel better. I'm sure you have lots of parents tell you that, right?
Good. Yeah. I'm glad.
All right, Michelle, appreciate it. And we'll catch up next time. Okay.
All right. Thanks. You.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.